The Only Girl in Bruges by J. A. Sloan. Chapter 1. Mystery Girl, 1955, Bruges, Belgium. Charles Janssens of Bruges, Belgium didn't have many close friends, but Robert Collins of Vienna, Virginia had that privilege. Robert had been teaching Charles sign language, something Charles had a heretofore unexplained passion to learn. Charles was an eager student and had been practicing. A mute himself, Robert was an excellent instructor. He worked as a government speaker-interpreter in Washington, D.C., and as a private tutor by mail. Charles and Robert had met through correspondence and had started lessons together in the spring. They had much more in common. They were close in age. Charles was now 30 and Robert was 31. Both were single. Both were parentless. Both enjoyed stories, Charles telling and Robert listening. Both liked a fine wine. It was the summer of 1955. Robert was traveling alone on vacation through Europe, and naturally had stopped to visit Charles. They were seated together on the rear patio of Charles' family home on Grauerstraat, in Bruges, facing the Zeebrugge Canal. This was the place that Charles had grown up, and where he kept his most precious memories. After several glasses of an excellent Austrian Zinfandel, the subject of conversation gravitated to the fairer sex. Robert wanted Charles to tell him about the mystery girl that he spoke of so often. "Shall I tell you all of it, then, from start to finish? Are you truly interested or simply being kind?" "Very well, then. There, that is where we must begin," Charles said emphatically, pointing to the second-story window of a home across the canal. "If we had both known sign language at the time, we could have talked," Charles began with a wry smile and a quick wink. After a healthy gulp of wine, Charles leaned back in his chaise, closed his eyes, and proceeded to tell Robert the story of his heart. "I remember how excited I would get. I'd sit on my bed and look out my window for her. There she is! How long have I been waiting here? It doesn't matter, there she is now. I see her. My heart would flip-flop, and my head would be filled with sweet words for her. Sonnets of love ready to jump from my mouth that I didn't think I could restrain, but must. She was over there, and I was over here. She wouldn't have heard me. Oh, how I ached. I recall seeing the light from her window glimmering on the waters between us. It was beautiful to behold, but not nearly so as she. My eyes could not stay away. Is the dress she wears blue? I could almost hear her say, 'Yes, my love.' I was in love with her, yes, and the color of blue. I was madly in love with this girl whom I'd never met. I didn't even know her name. How long did I know her like this, as an apparition in a window across from mine? Could she see me, seeing her? She must. I could feel that she could, and that she ached too. We would just sit at our windows for hours and ache together. I would dream sweetly of her. Good night, my darling in blue. You are the only girl in the world who matters to me. I had known her like this since I was 12 and she was but a waif. I loved her even then. I still remember the night the Germans came. It was May 10th, 1940. I was then 15, a young man, and she was a young lady, I think. She and I were together at our windows. She seemed sad, but I didn't know why. I sent my thoughts and prayers to her as I did every night, and still do, to reassure her. She wore yellow that night. I remember we both flinched at the first explosion. When I looked back, she was gone, and I trembled. We were told that Germany was invading Belgium again. I was not yet born when they had invaded us before. I remember the sirens of the city, warning us each night of planes bringing their bombs, the deafening explosions, and the earth shaking. I recall the rumble of the panzer tanks and armored vehicles and marching men in brown military uniforms with guns topped with bayonets swarming the city like furious ants. I remember seeing her each night and the terror in her eyes. Our king at the time, Leopold III, did not leave us like the others. My family stayed too. Belgium tried to resist, but Germany could not be stopped. Their blitzkrieg, lightning war, ran over us. Belgium had been declared neutral, but Germany didn't care. After only 18 days of fighting, we surrendered. The Germans occupied our country and made a prisoner of our king. Life for us here was then very stiff and strict. Food was scarce, but we had our windows and unspoken love. The canals that connect our beautiful city separated us from our neighbors. Unable to travel freely, we were imprisoned in our homes. The Germans, they were methodically cruel. We heard they were separating the Jews in Antwerp and Brussels. They were seizing property and taxing everyone. It was relatively quiet in Bruges. Of course, mother and father were subdued and sober. My little sister and I were confused, and our many questions went unanswered. Then one night, I did not see my darling at the window. I waited late into the night for her, but she did not come. No lights were visible at her house. It was March 5th, 1943. I was afraid for her. "Please, father, what is happening?" I had finally inquired. He should know. After all, he had been in service to the king for several years and was still receiving the official mail, once censored, from London. My father, whom I adored, said to me, "Charles, we must wait. It is best to remain calm and wait." I remember he glanced at mother, who was always good at remaining calm and waiting. I started to object and press him further for answers, but father touched his index finger to his lips and looked down at me, his eyes conveying clearly that now was not the time for debate. "It is best to not ask questions," he reiterated. Well, what was I to do? I was too old to whine and be excused, yet too young to rebel, especially in those difficult times. So I went to my room and waited at my window for her. That night and every night for a month I waited. She would not appear to me again. I can see her only in my dreams now. I eventually heard, but did not want to believe. The Germans had taken all the Jews away from Bruges too. What? Yes, I now know she was Jewish. Of course, at the time I could not be sure of anything. My family was to leave Belgium in July to go to the Congo to help with reforms there. Say again, please? Yes, that is correct. Father had been contacted by the Belgian office in London. He was to go to the capital in the Congo and wait for instructions. Arrangements had been made for all of us. That was all I knew. Imagine my heart and my head. I was not prepared for this reality. My only love had disappeared, and I greatly feared for her safety. The Germans were evil, and now we are to go into a heathen land of uncertainty. How can this be? My sister and I were both quite anxious. What did I feel? Well, lost, I suppose. Yes, I felt lost. I felt lost and broken-hearted. I felt I would never see her again, and I knew that I would never love another.